Thank you, guys. Those are some great talks we've heard so far. I'm really honored to be up here talking to you guys, speaking to the next generation. I don't think it's really fair in 15 minutes to talk about work-life balance and financial planning. If I could, no offense to Houston, but I'd be on a yacht in the Mediterranean right now. You see, so I have no disclosures, although I will say I do have two disclosures when putting this together. One, I don't think I'd consider myself wealthy. Two, if you ask my wife, she probably says I work too hard. So you could take this all with a grain of salt. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things in work-life balance and financial planning today. This is a text message my roommate from college and medical school sent me when I told him I was giving this talk, and I think it kind of solidifies how a lot of us feel in our day-to-day basis as we're going, just trying to really, you just can't do it. You just can't do it all. So just go through my background just so you know where I'm coming from and where this talk is coming from. I went to medical school at Boston University, did my residency at Rush in Chicago. I did a fellowship in MIS and hepatobiliary in Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. I'm employed by a large medical system. It's a teaching hospital with UIC residents. I see one of my residents here in the audience. We're a group of 6, about to be 7 surgeons. I'm on call about once a week and one weekend a month. Each surgeon does about 400 to 600 cases a year. Pretty busy group. So I was talking to my wife about putting together this talk, and she said, it's not fair. People always call it work-life balance, but that implies that it's even, right? Two sides of the seesaw are even, and that's not really true. So I'm going to call it a work-life equation, because according to her, there's really never an equal balance, just because of the nature of what we do, the nature of the field of surgery. And the best advice she gave was to have a reasonable expectation, that we are less disappointed. So I started asking my partners, what is your expectation of a work-life equation? For me, it was being home at for dinner most nights with my family, not working more weekends than the weekends I am working. Some of my partners said being home to see his kids before they go to bed, home to spend some time with their kids before they go to bed. And one of my more senior partners said that he's been lucky in his career, he's been able to prioritize the really important things and manage things so he can do it. I mean, take a moment, this is kind of sad. We work so hard that we're happy if we get to be home to just see our family go to sleep, right? That's our measure of happiness, but that's kind of where things are. So on both sides of this equation, on work, you have things like operating, clinic, teaching, administrative duties. On the life side, your family, friends, exercise, nutrition. These things aren't static through your career. This may be your early priorities in this order, but that might change as you get more senior. Maybe you're doing more administrative duties and teaching. And as you start having a bigger family, maybe your family and friends are bigger, and exercise and nutrition kind of drop down on your life size. And these are some things that we all have to evaluate ourselves and look at. So there's so many things in surgery that we're not in control of just by the nature of the business. So I wanted to just take a second to look at some of the things we are in control of. So when you're in residency, there's a good number of hands of residents and fellows here. You're not in charge of the schedule. You're sort of at the mercy of your attending in terms of what days are in clinic, what days or what's a long day, short day. So when you come out of training, you're no longer protected by the ACGME. You may be working more than 80 hours routinely, but you are in control of that time. And so don't think that it's so wrong to take advantage of. If there's something you need to do or want to be, maybe keep your clinic light that day. Maybe keep your OR light that day. Those are all things that I think we don't get taught in our training, but are things you need to be thinking about early on if that's based on your priorities. When you're looking at a job, I won't go into this too much, but look at these things when you're looking at the practice you're joining. How many partners are in the group? How is the call structured? Do you cover others? Do they cover you? Do you have residents? Do you have PAs? These are all going to be important part of keeping yourself happy at work. And I would recommend you take a step back also and kind of look at the bigger picture. Do your partners you're about to join, do they have families if that's important to you? Do they like their families? Do their families like them? I think these are important things to look at. And it can tell you a lot about how their priorities are and how they structure their priorities. And just in talking from the first talk in terms of, helping each other out as a greater good. Who's your team in the practice you're joining? And you can work on building them up. So your partners, if you're coming into a new practice, bringing these new MIS techniques that they're not doing, you want to educate them on that. Not necessarily they're going to do it, but so that they can help cover your patients if you're away at a conference like this. Taking time to teach your residents is really rewarding on many levels, but also teaching them so that you feel comfortable that they're taking care of the patients and the patients in the future. And I don't think this should be overlooked either, is talking to your office staff, because you may be joining a practice that never did these kind of surgeries that you're planning to bring. And taking some time to educate them will help when they're answering the phone calls, and dealing with your patients, at different times when you're tied up in the OR. Taking that time can really help you in the long run. I think when you join a practice, you should be looking to having mentors. I've been very lucky in my career. I've had several mentors, Dr. DeZiel and Dr. Milliken from my residency at Rush, Dr. Asman and Dr. Bowers, some of my mentors from fellowship. And on bottom, this is actually, my father's a general surgeon, so I worked with him for my first 2 years in practice, and it was kind of a built-in mentorship now. But they can teach you so much on medicine and so much on life that you don't necessarily get taught during your residency and fellowship. And that really can increase your satisfaction and decreases incidence of burnout. When we look at the work-life equation, we talk so much about how do we make work better? What do you make work better? I think it's so much times that we just ignore the life side of the equation. I'm sure you've all seen in your training and heard stories about that surgeon that's operating until he's in his mid-80s or 90s, because they really never had any life outside of surgery, and that's kind of how they define themselves. And then finally, when they do retire, they kind of lack a meaning and get some illness, and I think we've all heard these kind of stories. So this is something that we don't want to ignore. You have more control on the life side of the equation. Work's always going to be there, but taking control of the life side is very hard, and it takes dedication. And I think it's something that we should think about doing, kind of reevaluating at the end of each year, reflect on what you did and didn't do, and think about, do you have any regrets? Is there anything you would have done differently? Things just that I've found helpful is take your vacations. It's so easy to not do in your first couple of years, but make sure you do. Find some hobbies and activities, and more important than that, find meaning in those activities, because that's what's going to keep your drive there. Think about having some kind of protective family time, and staying physically active is important. For me and my wife, we do yoga and been into some mindfulness activities. I'm happy to talk to anyone about that on the side, and otherwise playing some sports. All right, I'm going to transition here to talk about financial planning in the next 6 minutes. So this is important because medical school is getting more expensive, student loan interest rates are getting higher, and physician salaries are decreasing, and a lot of that's because we're becoming more employed. But that's, again, beyond the scope. The other reason that financial planning is important is all the years we put into medical school, residency, and training and everything, most physicians are in their early to mid-30s when they start in practice making that salary. If you look at your friends in college that went right into a job in their 20s, they've had 10 years ahead of you of salary they've been making and investments they've been making. So we got to play catch up a little bit. Just like we dislike patients who see Dr. Google before coming to our clinic, I don't think we should use Google as your expert on personal finance. That being said, as physicians, we are smart. We all went to college, medical school, completed residency. This is something we could do. It's not that difficult. If you have the time and interest, it can be done, but I'd recommend doing the research. This is a book that actually the chief medical officer of my company just gave me when he heard I was giving this talk. And this is something that if anyone's interested, it's a very quick read, but it has a lot of helpful insight. It's called The White Coat Investor. If you're like me, who doesn't really have the time, and honestly, I just sleep better at night knowing that there's someone else taking care of the money we're making, I have a financial planner. Some of the tips when you're finding someone like that is you want someone that's fee only, not someone that's based on commission that's going to get paid every time they tell you to buy or sell a stock. You want someone that's fairly priced and offers the services you want. It's helpful to find someone that's had over 10 years of experience. And it's funny saying this to a group of young surgeons because we want everyone to come to us when we're freshly out of training. But it's important in the financial planning realm for one good reason is you want someone that's been there when the stock market's up and when the stock market's down, because they may have very different outlook on finances. And I would recommend just talking to your partners and your colleagues about who they've used and advice they have, and maybe they've had a few different, and they may have some input as well that can be different locally. The first thing our financial planner did was sit down and talk about our net worth, simply calculating your assets minus your liabilities, so assets like your bank account, investments, property values, and the liabilities of loans you have. This is just an important way to look at and figure out your wealth. So during residency, you can start some good habits, put aside some money each week. You can start a 401k now, because anything you start now and put away is going to have the longest time to grow. Recommendation most people have is renting your home if you're going to be moving after your residency, just because there's not enough time, and the tax breaks don't help too much during a resident's salary. When you're first out in practice, you've figured out how to live those 5 years or plus as a resident. You can still kind of live like a resident, even though your salary's gone up, your expenses don't have to. When it comes to people think about getting their home, you may rent for the first few years. That'll help you save for a down payment, or think about doing a starter home. And just a general rule of thumb is your mortgage should be equal to or less than double your annual salary. If you have high student loans, paying those off early is a really great investment in your future and investment in your wealth. If you have low interest loans, you can maybe pay the minimum amount and use that extra money to invest. That might help. It all depends on kind of where you're at. When you're taking your job, look at all of the benefits that come with your job. Being part of an employee position is a big group. We have a lot of benefits in terms of employer matches in our 401k plans, retirement plans. Look into that stuff and take advantage of that. If you're not using those, you're really leaving money on the table. This is money that's set aside, and these are some of the benefits that are kind of in your contract and in basically your employment. And if you're lucky enough to have family and kids, starting early to save for college, 529s. If you look at the numbers and what they think an annual college tuition would be in 14 years, it's.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it either. And if you're going to invest on your own, really make sure you're diversifying your investments. Don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, and that's for obvious reasons. When we look at retirement, people think, I need to, whatever money I'm making now, I need to have that money coming to me each month. But you don't have to. Most physicians can really retire comfortably in 25 to 50% of the money. Because if you think now, the money you're getting in your take-home paycheck, you're putting some of that into 401ks, some of that into college funds, you're paying your mortgage off. So hopefully when you're retired, a lot of those expenses are gone, and you can live comfortably with a lot less take-home pay. So in summary, these are some advice from my financial planner: having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 month expenses. If you can save around 20% of your income for retirement is great. Diversify your investments, and really in the end, do what makes you and your family really happy with the rest. I wanted to end with this one thought I have putting this together. When we go through training, we learn all the time about the 3 A's of being a good surgeon: being able, being affable, and being available. But I think there's more important than that. We need to think beyond that and think about the 3 A's of being a good husband or wife. Are you able? Are you available? Are you affable? Same thing being a parent, a friend, and a colleague. And these are some of the things that I think about going forward in maintaining your happiness. Thank you.